Brilliant. Hello. Hi, welcome everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Because we're short of a mic in this room, so yeah, got a thumbs up for the back, that's great. Thank you very much. Thanks so much to everyone for coming along. We really appreciate you being here. Hopefully you've had some pizza and a drink to get you warmed up for this event. So this is the, I can't remember how many, fifth maybe, Women in Data and AI Meetup, so still going strong. So thank you very much for coming along. And we'll be chatting all about media tonight, so a couple of really interesting speakers for you. I'm Ali Orr. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at the Data Lab, which runs the Data Lab community. I'd like to say a quick thank you very much to Live2Air, who are live streaming our event, so if anyone is watching online, welcome to you as well. Let me just give you a little bit of background about what we're going to be doing. So as I said, we've got two speakers. We've got Rachel Close, who is a senior responsible AI manager at the BBC. And we've got Lesley-Anne Kelly, who is the head of data journalism at DC Thomson. So one AI, one data. It's going to be an interesting mix. We'll be hearing about their experiences working in data and AI in media. So about 15 minutes for each presentation. And if you just hang on to any questions that you have, we will go over those at the end. And we're going to try something different tonight as well, for those of you that have been before. We're going to do a call out so that anyone that would like to promote their own event that they're doing, or any communities that they're running, or any projects you'd like to talk about, there'll be sort of 10 minutes to spare at the end where you can feel free to come up and put a little call out to everyone else about that as well. So for those of you who don't know, hopefully you do, but if you don't, this is a sort of QR code that will take you to the Data Lab community. We're at over 5,000 members now, and it's a free space for people to share ideas, join our events. We've got a number of jobs that get posted. So, and it's not just for women in data and AI, we've got a variety of different groups and specialisms. Our data visualization group is always very, very popular. So I think, is that everything I have to say on the community, Stephen? Haven't missed anything? Okay.
Social media.
Oh, sorry, I knew there was going to be something I forgot. Yes, we'd like for you all, if possible, to post on your own social media accounts tonight and tag the Data Lab community in them as well, please. It'd be great if you could do that and get some more people coming along and joining our community. That would be smashing. Now, without further ado, I will welcome Rachel. As I said, she's a senior responsible AI manager, leading implementation and subsequent operation of the governance and risk assessment framework for the BBC. I'll let you explain more about that yourself. Welcome up.
My attempt at a witty title. I'm so sorry. I'm sure I am not the first person to use it, but yes, with great technology comes great responsibility. And I'm here to talk about the opportunities and challenges of building a responsible AI approach, specifically for public service broadcasting. That is a mouthful, but you'll find that a lot of the challenges and opportunities are not specific to public service broadcasting and are across many large organizations, including in the media. But all of that's a mouthful, so we're sticking with Spider-Man or whoever originated this. Potentially Churchill, even before that, who knows? So, quick intro to me. These are icons that I have attempted to describe me. I studied actually right here at the University of Edinburgh in cognitive science, graduated in 2015. But after that, ended up working in risk and compliance, specifically for my sins as an IT auditor for a little bit, and then cybersecurity strategy as well. Responsible AI I see as a great way of bringing all of that stuff together, of how do you apply risk and compliance to emerging technology that has a lot of philosophical and ethical concerns about them that we'll be talking about a little bit there. Working at the BBC is just a bonus because I grew up watching Doctor Who, so this is really exciting for me. But let's go back in time, shall we? So back in the middle of 2022, the pre-Chat GPT era, this is what responsible AI looked like. It was really technical. Only a few people really engaged with it. People in this room probably were among those people, but it was for more technical, specialized skill sets. Really only for a handful of very tightly defined tasks. And all of these risks that we talk about now seemed really far into the future of like self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles, that sort of thing. And so there was a fairly straightforward AI development process to go alongside it. That was very technical, almost like another approval gate within a change management process or something like that. And similarly, when it comes to responsible AI, the same thing applied. It was all very focused on deploying AI, building AI, developing models on the ground, very focused on R&D departments, data scientists, that sort of thing. And so it looked a bit like this. We had an AI impact assessment, great, but it was very process-based, very risk and control-based, and all of that stuff is great and is still required. But as you'll see when we go through where we are now, it doesn't necessarily apply anymore. Because now, in addition to those technical areas, we also have every single product under the sun offering a GPT assistant to go along with it, and it starts to get a bit out of hand. In addition to those specialized areas, you can now generate text, generate images, generate code, all of these things that we hadn't really thought about, even just 2 years ago. And it's also not just the data scientists anymore. These tools have put it into the hands of every single person. And when it comes to the BBC, we also have thousands and thousands of freelancers that also come through our doors that we have to apply this to. So not just our 20,000 staff, but also the thousands of freelancers on top of it. And so there suddenly becomes all of these groups of users that you need to account for across this. You've got your data scientists, sure, but you've also got your journalists who are looking to leverage some of these tools to help maybe reformat a headline or something like that to meet different mediums. You have graphics teams looking to use generative fill and expand from Adobe, those sorts of things to help with their editing processes. And then you've also just got day-to-day people who want to use these tools to help with their workflows. I know I certainly do. It's great. I mean, if I could have generated this whole presentation with Gen AI, which I didn't, but if I could have, that would have been great. So suddenly you have an AI development lifecycle, but what you need to account for doesn't really map one-to-one anymore. And so it comes time that you need to sort of get away from that development lifecycle and that stage gate approach and think about responsible AI as a service for all. It's something that needs to apply to not just the technical people, but also just the everyday person who is looking to use ChatGPT to help them write an email, that sort of thing. And so in order to do that, we've discovered about 6 keys to making this work. And when I say keys to making this work, I'm not saying that we're perfect. We are very much learning as we go along. But there are 6 key lessons that we've really been working with over our time in developing this for the BBC. First off, leadership buy-in. Nothing happens without a sponsor. Without an owner, nothing happens. And we are really grateful to have Roger Taufin-Davies sponsoring the Generative AI program at the BBC. And you might have seen this come out at the end of February, an update on the BBC's plans for generative AI. We talk about it quite publicly on the different pilots that we're exploring. And I might get to it in the Q&A later. Literally today, some audience research was published as well about how BBC audiences feel about generative AI. In addition to leadership buy-in, don't reinvent the wheel. As much as we say that the existing process, isn't necessarily fit for purpose anymore, there are a lot of really good lessons there that we can leverage and things that we can build upon. Like risk. Risk management is nothing new. We can build upon that. Governance as well. Hopefully that's not new to most organizations. Training, communication. All of these things are really important and already exist. So it's just things we can leverage and add to rather than trying to create something completely from scratch. Caveat, unless it's broken. If it's not fit for purpose in the first place, don't leverage it. But it's also a really good opportunity to improve it because AI is getting a lot of sponsorship and a lot of engagement these days. So if something isn't working, you can use AI as an actual vehicle to improve other processes as well. Number 3, coordination and collaboration. Kind of thinking about everything from a single strategic perspective. AI is massively varied and the risks associated with it run the gamut of your standard information security, data protection, but also legal and commercial rights, those sorts of things. So you need a coordinated approach. Or as my illustrious boss James tends to describe it, as the responsible AI pie. There is the single slice of responsible AI that we look after from a deep technical perspective, and that's your bias, your accuracy, your fairness, your things that you think of when you think of a responsible approach to AI. But there's also a whole rest of the pie that you need to think about. Commercial end rights, particularly for the media, contributor rights is a huge thing, making sure that you are protecting the human creative element to what you're doing. How do you not displace actors, musicians, writers, but instead help them achieve greater potential with these technology? It's an enabler, not a replacement. Also for the BBC, editorial policy is massive. It's one of the biggest things that we look at. Everything has to be governed by the same editorial principles. So how do we make sure that the technology works towards those principles as well? And then the ones I mentioned earlier, legal, information security, data protection, those are also big, but in similar ways to they have been before. It is another technology with information security flaws and risk. Data protection, if you're using personal data, the ICO guidelines still apply. Legal, who owns the intellectual property coming out of these? These are things that we always have to wrestle with when we're engaging with humans. They're also things we have to wrestle with when engaging with AI. So as much as we have that single slice of the responsible AI pie, we also have the entire pie. So a lot of what I do day to day is not just look at risk assessments from that tiny slice, it's the attempting to coordinate all of these different areas as well. Herding cats, I think, has been used a few times, but not describing any of my colleagues as cats in any way, shape, or form. But just in general, when you have a whole bunch of different people, all with competing agendas, how do you coordinate all of that together and produce a one-stop shop or single coordinated approach, particularly when some of these processes are really entrenched within an organization and have been operating successfully? How do you plug into them? So back to the keys to making this work. Next, think about your users. So we talked about how the previous approaches to responsible AI were quite technical. So how do you flip that and think about just it being a service for all? Both building those tools from the ground up, also using tools, and my absolute favorite topic in the world, third parties. Not just third-party software coming in, but also your external contractors who want to use AI. This is a big thing in the media because we have freelancers everywhere. And you can't tell freelancers or third-party companies what they can and cannot do because they have their own processes. But you still need to make sure what they do is aligned to your values if it is to be done under your name. Or, as I like to say, you can't outsource accountability. It is the only thing that you cannot outsource. There might be other things, but I'm going to stick with it. It's the only thing that you cannot outsource. At the end of the day, you have decided to contract with the person. You have decided to use a tool. So it is up to us to make sure that it is aligned to what we do. Next up, storytelling. And to talk about storytelling rather than me, I want to introduce you to my friend Chad. This is Chad. Chad has been getting rave reviews on LinkedIn. He's up for hire, and you have been lucky enough to secure Chad in your team. He's brilliant. He's got a convincing answer for everything when you interviewed. You gave him the offer, and he has hit the ground running. He seems absolutely tireless. He's doing every single task that you throw at him. Fabulous reviews, really get stuff done, particularly the stuff that other people don't seem to want to do. It's amazing that you found this wonderful person. The problem is, you then look at him in a bit more detail, and you realize he's starting to make some stuff up, plagiarizing other works. Some stuff is actually defamatory. He's prone to bias, both gender and racial stereotypes, like nurses are women, doctors are men, that sort of thing starts creeping up in his work. He's starting to send sensitive information to third parties. Things that he should or shouldn't have access to is suddenly cropping up elsewhere. And you're also not clear at what he's doing. Your team seems to be using him for everything, but they're not always telling you when he's using it. They're not being very open or transparent about when they are using Chad's services in the team. And what do you do with Chad? Do you send him packing? Do you just get rid of him? You're certainly not thinking, what else can we get him to do? But maybe instead of just sending him packing, you recognize that he has some raw potential. He's got a great background, don't get me wrong. He's very learned. He seems to know everything. Maybe he just needs some oversight, some guidance, some training. And for those of you who have not guessed, this is ChatGPT. So Chad G. Peters is indeed ChatGPT. But this is an example of how we try to get the message across to all of our users at the BBC. I feel like I've talked to a million teams across the organization about Chad, and everybody knows who it is now. And fun fact, that image was created by Midjourney. It looks very realistic, but there's always something off about the eyes. It's like the serial killer eyes, when you look at AI-generated images. But it just gives you an example of what can really help to bring this to life when you start to engage with technology. Sometimes getting those technical concepts across can be really challenging for the everyday person who doesn't have a background in data science or research and development or software engineering. So using that human element is really good. And finally, related to that is culture. Nothing happens in a vacuum. I can design as many artifacts and processes and forms as I want, but until people actually engage with it and, more importantly, want to engage with it, nothing happens. So it's all well and good to have a back-end process, but you need people to actually engage with it. So to do that, we have some governing principles, and these are our 9 BBC AI principles. The top 3 you will see, or the headings you will see across all of Rodri's communications. They are our governing principles on how we are to engage with generative AI at the BBC. We will act in the best interests of the public, so aligning to our values, both staff and editorial, always focusing on fairness and being secure and robust. We will prioritize talent and creativity, always respecting others' rights, including privacy rights, and putting human creativity at the center. And we'll be open and transparent. So transparency, clear explanations when and why we are using AI. Keeping accountability, because it can't be outsourced, and that everything is on us, and we will take ownership of these. And always ensuring human oversight. So nothing is automated without at least somebody knowing about it in the first instance and providing that accountable oversight through regular review. And thankfully, at the BBC, this isn't new. Our editorial guidelines get refreshed regularly, and they are out there for not just staff to use, but also all of our freelancers to engage with. So it's something that is already quite embedded within the organization. So you might have seen also the BBC has a public editorial guidance for the use of AI that plugged into these guidelines to help anybody who is working with the BBC in an editorial capacity engage with those principles and use AI in a safe and responsible way. Or to steal Tim Davies' wording when he had his Royal Television Society speech, deploy AI on our terms and focus on AI for good. So, to bring all of this together, it looks a little bit like this. This is one half of the view. This is the back-end view of what our governance framework looks like. It seems quite technical, but it has all of the elements that we need to set it up for success. This is what I like to call the sort of the back end, the shop view of what we do, and this is what I do day in, day out. Looking at these control frameworks, prioritization, processes, those sorts of things. But that's really only half the story. What's more important is to have a user journey and a front end. So it's all well and good, as I said, to have all of our processes, but until people engage with them and know when they need to engage with all of these, nothing happens. So instead we have a user journey where they can engage with each of these artifacts on a sort of structured basis, working their way through it and taking a risk-based approach. So we don't have to throw a massive 200-question impact assessment at somebody who just wants ChatGPT to help them draft an email. Instead, we save that for the higher risk side of things and enable our staff to get on with it through supported guidance, through supported training, and increasing awareness of risk. And I think that's pretty good on time there, so thank you very much. That's me. Thank you, Ali.
Thanks so much.
No worries.
Thank you so much. It's
Take
so
my break.
interesting. I'm sure you've probably got some questions, but just hang on to them for the minute because I'm going to invite up our next speaker. We've got Lesley-Anne, and she's the head of data journalism at DC Thomson. She and the team are passionate about making data more accessible for readers through a blend of traditional journalism, skills in data analysis and visualization, and they strive to be at the cutting edge of storytelling. So let's hear more. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I always like to oversell my bio, so let's hope I live up to that. So, yeah, data journalism. So what is data journalism? It is very stereotypical for a data journalist to use a chart to explain what their job is. So data journalism for me is this bit in the middle of the Venn diagram, which includes journalism. We are first and foremost journalists. We write articles, we speak to people, interview people. You often have to speak to experts to understand the data that you are covering. We have skills in data science. We all code R, Python, JavaScript, really whatever we need to use to do the job. We're always learning new bits and pieces of code. And graphic design, because we do data visualization to make the the data pretty inaccessible for our readers. And I also really like this diagram one because everybody loves Lego, and so it's a nice, easily accessible diagram for people. But essentially, this to me explains data journalism. We tell stories with data. We take the big, messy pile at the top, we present it visually, and then we do the end part, which is we build the house around it. We tell the story. We speak to people, we insert experts, we, add the context and the narrative to the charts and the data. So I always find that despite those explanations, people don't understand what data journalism is, and the best way to explain it to them is just to go over some examples. So I'm going to go over 2 examples of projects that we've been working on, and one is serious and award-winning, and one is not. So the first is our Tracking the High Street project, which is a project that's been our baby for the last, it's coming up to its 1-year anniversary next week actually. And what it was essentially we realised that with the pandemic, cost of living crisis, our high streets were suffering, but we couldn't find the right data that we wanted to really quantify that. So we essentially got out on foot, pounded the pavements and counted the vacant units across high streets in Dundee and Aberdeen. And then in December last year, we added Inverness and Perth to the project, so we're now tracking high street data for half of Scotland's cities. So we now have almost 2,000 retail spaces that we're tracking. We track these constantly. Whenever one of our reporters writes an article about a unit opening or closing, we update this data. And then we also get out on foot once a quarter to quality assure the data, and we write fresh analysis pieces. This picture here is me out in Dundee, and with my silly red clipboard, just out of shot is the moon boot and crutches, because just after launching this project that involved pounding the pavements, I broke my ankle. So yeah, that was fun. So this is roughly what it looks like. There is this for essentially every city that we cover. But we do shopping centres as well, so we have interactive floor plans of the shopping centres where the red units are vacant, blue units are occupied, and we keep all that up to date. You can hover over them and get more information about the types of units. We have kind of 3D building maps where every single one of these is hand-drawn because we could not get the type of GIS data that we needed at the kind of very specific unit level. So we hand-drew 2,000 retail units, which was a fun task. For each city, we look at, whenever we mark one of these units as red, we will try and find how long has this unit been vacant to see what are our most persistent and offensive vacant units. So there's one in Dundee that's been vacant for 14 years now. There's one in Aberdeen that's been vacant for more than 20 years. So we've done some work tracking down the owners and kind of doorstepping them and saying, why are you letting this go vacant? Dundee, the red units are owned quite a lot by Mike Ashley of Sports Direct, so he doesn't care. We have charts that show the average vacancy rates across the various different streets. We also have done a bunch of bespoke analysis based on this, because now we have data for 4 cities. We've been able to compare and contrast the cities. We've been able to say, does independent shops being on streets impact the vacancy rates? We've done, like I said, we tracked down the landlords. We did a whole investigation called Who Owns the High Street? And we won just a silly little international journalism award for it. So yeah, that's the serious project that I'll talk to you about to get the serious bit out of the way before I move on to my data journalism villain origin story. I always call this my villain origin story and let people decide at the end if I'm the hero or the villain, but you know what I think. So I've been a data journalist now for around 7 years, and I'm now the head of data journalism at DC Thomson. But I started as DC Thomson's first and only data journalist back then, and they didn't really know what a data journalist was. So I had to kind of help them and teach them and show them, elbow my way into stories, show them what a data journalist could add to the newsroom. So I was sitting one day and I was on the NRS website, the National Records of Scotland, looking at this page, the future publications page, and I spotted that in a few weeks' time they were going to be publishing their baby name data set. And that was one of those sliding doors moments in my life, and I'm not sure where my career would be now if I hadn't spotted that they were going to be publishing that. So I thought, wonder what we normally publish on baby name data. Had a look. No offence to my colleagues, but it wasn't good. It was, here's your most popular baby name this year. It was dull. I looked at a bunch of other places and didn't find much more of interest, but what I could see from the NRS data was that there was an absolute wealth of interest and stories in here. So I did what any sane baby data journalist does and downloaded all of the data going back to 1974. I filtered it down and looked for baby names that had only been used once in that time, which I call baby name wax, which is a reference to Dave Gorman. So I found, for example, the baby Beyonce in Scotland that was born in 2004. I found at the time this was a baby name whack. The Freedom born in 2014, which I don't know if anyone can think of anything that happened in 2014 that would cause that level of patriotism. There was another one in 2022. I spoke at the SNP conference at a Data Fringe event last year, and I suggested this as an alternative independence reference kind of feelings tracker, but yeah, nobody really went for it. But then I discovered the thing that really became my reason for being, my reason to get up in the morning, and that was that in 1981, a baby boy was born and his parents named him Sharp. So I was a baby data journalist. I was the only data journalist in Scotland, and actually, possibly, in DC Thomson. I didn't really have much that I could do with this information at the time. But several years later, so we've gone post-pandemic at this point, I ended up getting a team and several promotions during the pandemic because I worked every single day for about 2 years dealing with the COVID data. And I think they looked at the bags under my eyes and thought, we either need to give her a team or she's going to sue us. So they gave me a team. And one of the first things that I pitched in this kind of newsroom restructure where I now had some power was, let's do something proper with that baby name data. So the thing that I actually pitched to my manager at the time was, do you know that there's no baby girls named Karen anymore in Scotland? And I tie that to the can I speak to the manager meme. So we did a whole analysis of the 50 years of data, but that wasn't enough for me. I needed a series of 11 articles. So we looked at, for example, Scotland's most androgynous names. We looked at the more unique names because that's really the thing that's happening these days is people are adding hyphens, adding extra letters to names to get more and more unique names. We mapped out Scottish baby names that were potentially inspired by Scottish place names. My favourite is Isla-Skye. I actually think that one's quite pretty. We looked at, does the age of the parents impact the name that they choose? Goodbye Gary is one of my favourite articles, and it's possibly because my husband's name is Gary, but we looked at Scottish baby names that are on a sugary peg, so the names that are at risk of dying out or have died out, or names that I call phoenix names because they've come back. And you may also notice something up in the top corner there. So I got short in a headline. Essentially, that was my claim to fame. But I saw this is my moment, this is my opportunity. I'm going to write about Sharp, and that gives me a reason to try and find them, essentially. But what I did for this article to actually make it data journalism was I sent a Freedom of Information request to the National Records of Scotland to get the rules that registrars have to use when parents come in and register babies. And it turns out there aren't really any rules. We are a lawless state. But there are guidance notes. So essentially for this article, I went through line by line those guidance notes and said, these guidance notes aren't being followed. So for example, you are not meant to be able to use an unusual spelling of a name that could cause confusion. So these are the two most popular names right now in Scotland and unusual spellings of them. You're not meant to be able to use a name that is considered a title of dignity or status. Baby princess, baby king, baby duke, baron. So that's not being followed. And then you're not meant to be able to use a name that is a single letter. And we have 82 as of the latest data up to 2023. So what was it? 19 A's, 10 C's, 2 D's. The I's and the U's and Y's are always I think are going to lead to the most issues. But there's also a line in it about potentially offensive names. Now I think it's an incredibly silly rule or guidance note, whatever you want to call it, because that's going to be subjective from registrar to registrar. So I went through and found any names that I could find that were potentially offensive. So baby anus, baby Sharp, obviously, baby Lolita, baby tit, baby swastika. Cosa Nostra is a recent entrant. We update this data every year when the new data comes out. Cosa Nostra, which if you're not familiar, is the Sicilian mafia. So I think someone was reading too many mafia novels when they were pregnant. I tracked down the mother of one of the baby Lucifers, and she's told me that it was after the TV show, not the devil. So, but apparently had absolutely no issues getting that name registered when she went to the registrar's office. So I made a TikTok about this, trying to track down Sharp, and you'll see it got kind of a lot of views. And I ended up with a bunch of people sliding into my DM saying I went to school with Sharp. And it turned out DC Thomson is based in Dundee. I live in Dundee. Sharp was born in Dundee. Shart lived round the corner from me. He doesn't anymore, but I made a TikTok. I didn't sleep that night. I got the information to track down Shart. And that is the story of how I impacted worldwide search terms for the word Shart. You see that spike there, that 100 on Google Trends? That's me. But I won't leave you hanging. He has changed his name several times and fled the country. But he is in his mid-40s and has in his birth certificate that his name is Shart. So there you go. And it was not a misspelling. It was intended to be Shart. So there we go. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter and TikTok for, much japes like this. And you can find our serious journalism and the less serious baby name journalism if you go on the Courier or Press and Journal in our data tags. We will be doing lots of stuff about the election. That is our big thing right now because Rishi decided to ruin our summers. So yeah. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was so funny. Grab a seat.
Oh,
Is that all right?
yep, excellent.
Cool. Thanks
Grab a
so
drink.
much. Do you want to come up and grab a seat? That was brilliant.
What do you want to say?
I'm going to stand because I'm going to go out to the audience after this anyway. Okay. So we'll give you a minute to jump up on your seats very carefully. Please don't anyone fall off.
We're two very short women.
Yeah, we definitely need to get ourselves in lower seats.
Climbing Everest. Oh,
that was so funny. That made me laugh so much. And also be glad that I chose fairly average names for my children. So hopefully they're super grateful for that. They don't appear in any
I'm
charts
always trying to
anywhere.
encourage people who are pregnant to be the
Go with
second
crazy
Shart.
names.
I have like 3 friends who are pregnant right now. I'm sending them this.
There's some suggestions right there. That's brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to come to you all for some questions in a minute or two, so get thinking for the minute. But I've jotted down a couple myself, if that is okay. Just starting with yourself, Rachel. Question for you is, how do you balance reassuring sort of people's fears about AI in a sort of BBC setting, I guess, but also still making the most of the opportunities?
And it's something we've been struggling with quite a bit. And I think in particular, the BBC has quite a high bar for these sorts of things. We're very risk averse for good reason, because we are, a public service broadcaster. We are funded by license fee payers and everything. So we have a duty to make sure that we are, working with our audiences on this. So I briefly mentioned during that the audience research, which helpfully literally got published today, which I've been so excited about. You can go and find the report and everything. It is available publicly. On people's responses to AI. And it's been really helpfully informative towards our views on this. So in particular, we've been finding that audiences sort of expect people to use Gen AI. That was, I don't know if it's surprising, but it was one of the big things that came out of it, of like, people think Gen AI is here to stay. And this is a big paradigm shift. It's not just yet another buzz. It's not a metaverse. It's more of a social media type thing. But they're very protective about where you use it. So that while there is the expectation to use it, people don't want it any associated with like hero content. So Doctor Who, Bluey, those sorts of things. That's really protected. But they're more open to experimentation and things like some podcasts, sounds. So we've been trying to use that alongside some of our principles as well. So you'll see that human creativity is one of our guiding principles. Contributor rights are always consulted every single time we are doing anything about this, so that we make sure that we are working with our creative industry and working with our audiences rather than trying to disrupt. The other thing that we're looking at is AI literacy, and how can we help to improve that sort of relationship between audiences and the technology, because a lot of this comes down to communication and awareness. It's like I said about culture in an organization, but that could be applied to culture in the world as well and in society, of just how do you make sure that people have a positive relationship to this while acknowledging the risk? So it's all about collaboration and working with them.
Thank you so much for indulging my question. I know I haven't run this one past you, so I hope that's okay. I got a chance to run Rachel's question past her, but I can pick a different one if this doesn't suit. What role, in your opinion, what role does data play in the media in terms of the upcoming election? And I guess it's particularly topical now, obviously, because you said our summers have been ruined, but also we've got France election coming up, you've got American election coming up, just had one in India, so like elections galore.
I think elections are a great example of the kind of bread and butter of data journalism. And there was an article in the middle of the pandemic talking about look at the vital statistics on these lads, and it was about the rise of data journalism and picking out men. and thinking that they were all men, but it had a line in it about how data journalists are generally relegated to the cupboard unless there's something like an election. Wow. And since the pandemic, I think that's massively changed. But I think the election it's a chance for us to really kind of show what we can do. Yeah. And I think that that's good for bringing in audiences. But I also think data journalism and things like the elections is a good opportunity for trying to build back trust in media, because you can make data lie, you absolutely can, but presenting things in a very neutral and informative way, I think I've found from people responding to TikToks and comments on our articles that it does help to win that trust back a little bit.
Yeah, and it'll be keeping you busy all summer, I should think.
Yeah.
No more summer holidays for you guys.
Yeah.
Super, thank you so much. How about yourselves in the audience? Who has a question for one of our panellists? Yeah, I've not got a mic. Oh no, I do. I lie. I do have a mic.
Sorry. You were just waving.
You were just waving. Oh, okay, no worries. Here's another question. That's fine. Not waving this time. Actual question.
No. Hi there.
It's not. It doesn't have sound. Just for our live stream.
Oh, okay. Hi. Feel very famous. No, I was just wondering. Now we talk a lot about safety and AI as it's one different thing, but obviously, if every company is creating their own AI, and like I was wondering, you're saying that you can't help but have people, for example, at the BBC or at DC Thomson to use it. But is there one that you recommend that is safer? Like we all talk about ChatGPT, but then you have Anthropic's Claude, and their whole thing is about being like more safe and privacy and so on. So I was wondering, what's your opinion on that?
Can't answer that. Thank you so much. Reality, do you want to?
Oh, really? Okay.
I can talk a little bit about how we assess it, but if you have a recommendation.
We are in an infancy of AI policy at DC Thomson. We have a policy in terms of what we're allowed to use, and it just tends to be the kind of bigger, tested, more open algorithm ones. Things like Copilot are something that we're testing. So going down that more kind of using it for efficiency routes. We also use it a little bit, like you mentioned in your talk, for kind of refining headlines or SEO and things like that. But yeah, it tends to be the big guys because we kind of need to follow on from what people like the BBC do, and you guys test it out, and then we kind of learn from that. Yeah.
No, and that's, yeah, so we definitely have a policy of only use authorized tools, so things that have been through the evaluation process. And while I won't name like specific ones or anything like that, we do have an impact assessment, as I mentioned. It's not 200 questions, thankfully, it's about 55. But when it comes to evaluating these tools, we split it in half, and half of the questions go to the internal users of who want to actually use the tools and asking them how they plan on using it. And half of the questions go directly to the model providers. And it will be asking like, what bias testing have you done over this? Can you provide us with the model cards so that we can assess them? I feel like I've spent half my life reading OpenAI's model cards because all of these are based off of OpenAI's models. But there is a wealth of information out there because I think, particularly since the EU AI Act text was published, more of those developers are realizing they're going to have to make some of that information public. Mm-hmm. But I will say, it is really interesting when you dig under the hood and you realize that OpenAI themselves say their models are only accurate like 60% of the time. And that is where that communication and guidance comes in, because you got to use it in order to embrace the opportunities, but applying that oversight, guidance, and making sure everybody is empowered to use it in a safe way is the other half of that. Hopefully that's answered your question, not been too wishy-washy of going around it.
It's brilliant. I'll just come round. Give me 1 second. It's not for sound, just for our live stream. If you don't mind talking, it'd be great. Thank you.
Which are the most innovative organisations in the media or in other spaces that are using AI that you've got your eyes on?
About that. I mean, oh, go ahead.
No, I was at a data and investigative journalism conference a few weeks ago in Belgium, and The Guardian were there, and they spoke a lot about using LLMs for things like going through huge amounts of documents to pull out trends and pull out kind of stories and things like that. And there was also a guy there from Tromsø, a local publisher who were using AI. Their they seem to not be GDPR compliant because they have insane public data laws. Like every email that's sent between council officers is open, and so they essentially use AI to read through all of those emails and documents every day and ping stories to journalists. But yeah, those are just some examples that I've learned at that conference that were really interesting. The Guardian in particular, Carmen Aguirre-Garcia, she does a lot of work with AI.
There's also an interesting dichotomy, I think, happening in media organizations where you've got those like the FT looking at potential deals with the model providers to provide their content. And then you've got other organizations, the BBC included, that have blocked data scraping to our content. And I'm very interested to see how those two
and then
go.
some companies that are taking OpenAI to court because
like
of
New York Times,
privacy
right?
concerns. Not privacy concerns, rights concerns of not wanting their work to be used to train the AI, and also for future fears of thinking, is AI going to replace journalism? Like one day could you ask ChatGPT to summarize the headlines and it means that nobody comes to our websites anymore, and then we all suffer from that. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of different approaches to AI going on in the media.
Yeah, it's a bit of a watch and see, or wait and see to it.
First of all, great presentations. I really enjoyed it. I've got a question with regards to the AI kind of governance framework and the AI assessments with so many third-party suppliers. They've got their embedded tools. Obviously, you've got your applied kind of more advanced models, and seeing that user journey and how you kind of make that quite flexible. But how rigorous is the AI inventory, and do you look at all of the third-party tools? Because even looking at our work in brand and marketing, and actually there's just a plethora of solutions out there. So how do you approach that now, and how are you set up as there'll be only a scaling of these tools available for people?
That is an excellent question. Thank you. Part of what keeps me up at night, figuring out how we actually try to do with all of these. The main thing that we do is make it very risk-based. It's a risk-based approach to what we do. So as you say, every tool has started to introduce these sorts of features, but we try to focus more on the outcome and what is it that we are using the outputs for. And that then helps determine the risk. So if somebody is using a tool to try to identify trends in social media, that is only one part of research that is going into a report somewhere, we might not look at that in any great detail. But if somebody, and this is not a live BBC example, this is purely hypothetical, but if somebody is using a tool to automatically synthesize all this information and directly publish it to audiences or something like that, yeah, that we would want to take a really close look at and make sure it had gone through all the evaluation before, if it at all, went ahead. It's not perfect, and I don't think we currently have a process set up in a way to respond to all of it. It's something that we're trying to build and iterate over time, particularly as more and more of these tools start to come out. But the short answer is we don't look at every single thing, but everything is at least subject to an authorization process where we've at least triaged it, if not done a full risk assessment. And we are trying to sort of iterate that over time in order to respond to that demand, whether it's bringing in more people to look at it. So talk about AI replacing jobs, AI is creating jobs there in that case, but also just making the process as flexible as possible.
One area that I can think of that might be tricky is the kind of sneaky sleeper cell AI that's been introduced to a lot of software, like things like Canva now does AI.
Yep, that's on our list.
LinkedIn does AI generated posts, and there's probably a lot of opportunity for people not even realising that they're interacting with AI and it's not an approved thing on each organisation's list.
Or it's even more dangerous when it is an approved tool, but we haven't looked at the AI features. So that happened to us with Adobe. So Adobe rolled out generative fill and expand basically overnight, I think, on that. And they did provide the option to turn it off so that we were doing the assessment and all of that, which was good. But it's sort of relied on people realizing that it had happened to be able to respond to it quickly. And when it's already authorized, we don't have that backbone of but it hasn't gone through the process, because it did. It just did before they introduced this. And that's what makes it difficult.
Thank you very much. And I think there was another question. That's okay, great, it's plenty of time.
Thank you, they were both great talks. I'm afraid it's another AI question. So unless I missed some small print, I didn't see a part of the principles talking about environmental sustainability and energy costs. And I wondered if you considered that as part of your responsible AI roadmap and how you were acting on it.
Yes, very much so. It's under BBC values, because the BBC has a sustainability initiative and sustainability promise. We do ask questions about sustainability when we do our impact assessments, particularly have you thought about the environmental impact of bringing on this tool? I will say we don't always get the best responses to that. It's definitely a new thing that people are considering, particularly when we ask a tool like, oh, you agreed to implement OpenAI, have you thought about the sustainability impact of that? And get a lot of blank stares when you ask that question. But it is something we're trying to focus on. And if you haven't seen it, Zoe Kleinman, our technology editor, did a great piece, a great report on what the sustainability impact of AI is. Highly recommend looking at it, because it's slightly terrifying when you look at it in detail. But but the answer to your question is yes, it's something that we are considering and are asking about, though, to mixed levels of success, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello. Yeah, also really great talks. Thank you so much. My question is really broad, so let me ask it and then give some more context. Is how do you make people care without getting too existential about it? Because obviously what you're talking about is AI ethics, and you're talking about getting 1 million views talking about charts and data, which is obviously not always appropriate in every context. Probably most is not appropriate. But I'm just curious as to how you see some of these almost like buzzwordy trend ways to get people interested in data and AI into the everyday, because people just want to save time. They don't want to do more learning and research. Everyone's talking about ChatGPT and or the other tools that you've mentioned. It's a big old question, so I appreciate there's probably not a short answer, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, sure. For data journalism, the thing that we always try and bring it back to is, for charts in particular, the person has to be in the chart. So they have to be able to find themselves in it to relate to the story. And that's what we try and do. And it's not always possible. It depends on the subject. Like, you're not going to find yourself in an election map, but you can find your constituency. You can find something that is relatable to you. But so it's all about bringing it back to that person and also humanising it by finding people who are impacted by the data, like, sharp. Yeah, so that's what I think. What you're talking about with people not having time and not having time to research and all that kind of stuff is actually where data journalism really helps and fits in, because we make it easier for people and kind of condense those subjects down. So yeah, that's what we try and do anyway.
And similarly, it's all the storytelling and trying to bring it to life. So I did the Chad G. Peters example there, but we also have other stories that we try to tell as we get people to care. But in addition to the stories, it's the examples. So one of the most powerful ones that I've seen is literally taking the terms and conditions of one of the tools that people are definitely not using up on the screen and highlighting. It's like, yeah, you're signing away your rights to everything that you put in this, and they can use it forever. So, and you suddenly watch faces fall as they realize that they've literally just lost the rights. Now, is the company going to come and sue you or you actually use that? Remains to be seen. But the risk is there, and you don't have a legal background for it. And that can be quite scary, so we always try to pair that with a positive as well. And our go-to message is responsible AI is better AI. It's better for you, it's better for the environment, it's better for people, that sort of thing. But you can find examples of AI for good. And like one of the best ones is AI advancements in assistive technology, and how it can help disabled users to, yeah, exactly. And bringing those examples to life of why it is really important to do this ethically and think about the people that this is impacting. It really resonates with people. You try to avoid the detail when you're doing big conversations, but sometimes it is in the detail that people find that resonation.
Can I ask a follow-up question for Lesley-Anne, please, if that's okay? How do you prioritize? So do you just kind of wait to see some things? Is there like an interesting topic that you go and seek out the data on and bring it together, or do you wait and see what's trending? Like where do you begin with what might work?
The kind of style of data journalism we do tends to be quite slow data journalism, so we will probably have about 50% of our workload planned out for the year, and then the rest is kind of reacting to things. So for example, the election, or we just did a bunch of stuff on air quality because the LEZs are being introduced in cities that our publishers are in. So we tend to have a mix, but it's the bigger projects, like for example, the high street tracking projects tend to be planned out quite far in advance, because that slower, kind of more investigative data journalism tends to be what resonates with our audience, because our papers are a subscriber-based model, so they want that more in-depth stuff. But yeah, we will look at kind of what are our readers really interested in right now and try and find data that fits into that. Or sometimes we'll just find a really cool data set and want to do something on it. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you for answering that. Another question. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. Actually, building on that about the data journalism, do you have a process that you follow from a cool data set to like find the story in the data and then translate that into visuals or whatever visualization that you're creating that speaks to people, the general public, I suppose?
Yeah, it tends to be the words are the absolute last thing that goes into data journalism, and I think that's probably quite universal with most data journalists. I know that people don't tend to understand how much work goes into writing one line of copy in data journalism. You'll find the data, or you'll have to go and make the data, or FOI for the data, or however you've gotten the data. Probably tend to do some kind of exploratory data visualization, data analysis on it, trying to find the lines in it, find the story, find what the angle is, and then go away and do some research, speak to some experts, make sure you're understanding the data properly, see if you can find some people impacted by it. Then we tend to start thinking, right, how do we visually present this, whether that's scrolly telling or data visualizations, and then we would tend to work the copy around that to make it flow. Where we've quite often fell down is in the past working with reporters who they come to us at the end and just want a chart to fit in because they want something just to go in this space. And that's not really how data journalism works best. It works best where everything is kind of all one whole and flows together. So, but yeah, the words for us tend to be the absolute last thing to come together.
Down here, and then I'll come to you next.
Yeah, it sort of follows on again, another data question. It was really interesting to see that in the High Street Monitoring project, you're not just using other people's data, you're actually generating and creating your own data as well, which looked like it could be very useful for other organisations. And I was just curious if that's a common thing you do and if you share any of that data more openly.
We have heard from a bunch. That was actually really interesting. When I pitched that story, there was people in my organisation that didn't necessarily believe that the data didn't exist anywhere. And so I just had to go out and make it, and then we published it. And then the proof was in the pudding of the amount of people that were coming to us asking for access to the data, because the data really genuinely doesn't exist anywhere. We had the council coming to us, the local council. We had councils in other areas coming to us because they wanted to run a similar project in their area. We had advanced higher geography pupils wanting access to the data. We had academics from Aberdeen University wanting it for Scottish Government reports. We've had all sorts of people who've come to us for the data because, and there's been a few kind of commercial conversations about the monetary value of the data that had nothing to do with me, because if it was anything to do with me, it would go on GitHub for free. So that's why I'm not involved in those kind of conversations. But yeah, there's been quite a lot of people coming to us, and we have generally just made them a bespoke report. We also put together, we did as part of that project, we did a town hall style live event where we got our kind of local council leader and people could put questions to him, as well as an expert in high street regeneration. And we also made a 40-page white paper of all of our analysis that we've done so far. But yeah, that is basically all data that we've created. It's not something that we do a lot. We've done that a few times where the data hasn't existed. For example, I got a wild hair up my arse once about which areas of Scotland call a chip shop a chipper and which areas call it a chippy. Turns out it's just Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire that call it a chipper, because
I've literally never heard
yeah, no, it's just them. But we had to do surveys to get that information, and then I was able to make the great chip shop map of Scotland and point out that it's just Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire that are the strange ones in there. But yeah, we will generally try and find data first, because there's no point like remaking a wheel. No point rebuilding something if you don't need to, but we're not afraid of going out and getting that data ourselves as well, because that, in the end, generally, often is a more valuable product because no one else has that. Our reporters, whenever they're writing an article about something closing or something opening on one of their streets, they have access to a Google Sheet kind of condensed version of that tracker, and they can say, Commercial Street is the third most vacant street in Dundee with a vacancy rate of blah, 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 which is higher than the average in Dundee. So they have access to that exclusive data that no other publisher has because we made it. So yeah, it has been quite valuable.
Question for yourself? Excuse me, I'll stretch over.
Thank you. Thank you both for your presentations. It was actually quite good to see a little bit of your journeys, personal journeys as well, like as women in AI. I had a question around what government support, if any, or what obstacles do you face, you find facing in your roles? Like, how do things look from a regulatory perspective? How do things look from budgeting opportunities perspective, whether there's any support, any interest, what's going on there?
The regulatory perspective, which is, it is extremely complex. So the BBC, while we are a UK organization, we have got BBC World Service, so operate bureaus across the world. So there are local regulations that we have to think about. The EU AI Act is extra-jurisdictional, I think is the phrase, similar to GDPR. So there's going to be...
Choosing to buy into it.
Yeah. Yeah, so there are things that we're going to have to look at for that. And not all of these regulations are aligned, and in some cases they are in direct contradiction to each other. And that is a huge problem, and one that me as not a lawyer or like regulatory policy expert will be solving. But what we have done is we've set up a forum to almost track those regulations and kind of scan for what's happening out there, run by my legal and policy colleagues, and I just kind of join as an interested party to then tell the operational teams what's coming down the line so that we can adjust our processes accordingly. We're going to have to end up with a sort of federated type approach to the different locations, just where they are in contradiction to each other, which is never nice, but that happened with GDPR. And kind of going back to don't reinvent the wheel, we had to do it for GDPR, so there is a blueprint that we can follow with some of these. Was it perfect? Probably not. I don't think a single organization got GDPR right the first time around, and so there are lessons to be learned. But we have something that we can go off there, and that's just kind of what we're doing. A lot of these regulations, unfortunately, are a bit wait and see, because even the EU AI Act, we don't know exactly what it'll mean for us down the line. On the budgetary side, I mean, BBC is public service. I think it's pretty obvious that we've had budgetary issues over time, and it's weird where AI can both help with that, and also it is a hindrance to it in order to set up all of those things. So it is a challenge. There are some ongoing conversations. It is nice in that AI does have a lot of interest, and so people are kind of looking at sponsorship and things there, but I think it's always going to be a challenge. I wish I had a more happy answer to that question, sadly, but yeah.
I think for journalism side of things, and I always find it quite interesting, we are bound by the exact same regulations as any other journalist, so IPSO, the kind of authority for telling us off if we've done something wrong. And I've had a few conversations with them where I've kind of said, okay, so we write a bunch of code. Something in that is horribly wrong. Someone points that out, it goes to IPSO. Do you have people at IPSO that could actually...
Excellent question.
I've had conversations and they've kind of said, oh, well, there's a guy that's good with spreadsheets. And I'm like The Economist's excess desk tracker, for example, an absolutely massive bit of code that won all sorts of awards. It's incredible. But what if there was something that was really wrong with that and someone pointed it out? Who would that be accountable to? And I'm not sure that, I think it's probably the same with AI, that I'm not sure that our regulators are really fully prepared to deal with that, but there isn't an answer as far as I can see. In budgets, it's kind of very similar but different. We're a private company. We don't have shareholders or anything like that. We are owned by a family, the Thomson family, who fund all of the DC Thomson newspapers. So I'm not entirely sure what kind of government support they get. I imagine there are some government support because we're local journalism and there is still some government support for that, but yeah, I don't know. Not data journalism specifically anyway.
The point on the regulations, we're having the same thing with Ofcom, 100%. Ofcom will have some, based on the UK white paper on AI, Ofcom will have some regulatory responsibilities to manage this, but...
Are they prepared?
They are, from what I hear, they are struggling to hire as well. to bring in experts in that field, because it's quite a hot topic, and everybody with AI in their title wants to go work for Google or Meta or Amazon or one of those. So yeah, it is a tough one, and that's why AI literacy and education is really important, because even if you don't understand the technology of how it works, you can understand the outcomes and what to check for and what's right and what's wrong.
I think it's for both data and AI. I think it probably just needs that big test case for the regulators to actually realise that they would probably have to outsource it to get some freelancers to do that kind of regulation. But I think it probably needs some kind of slap in the face, something going horribly wrong that they need to actually have those resources.
All the consultancies' eyes just flashed as you
Yeah.
said that.
I've got one more question, if that's all right. Thank you very much.
Then related to the last question, and also someone before asked, how do you make people care? My question is, how do you make corporation cares? Because obviously they are the ones who are invested majorly into AI. So does the pressure all need to come from a regulator, from the government, or can we highlight risks that they need to focus on so that they can be prompted to put in place the right governance and so on?
And I don't know if anybody else is a fellow Edinburgh alumni. The General Council meeting over the weekend did a discussion on AI, and Eve Poole gave a great talk about like philosophical frameworks in corporations and how you get people to care. She made an excellent point that as much as it is difficult to get governments and other corporations and everything to change, consumers actually have a lot of power on these. So kind of getting people to care in a way can make corporations care. If people are a little bit more selective on what technologies they use or are really asking those questions, it can make a difference. It is not quick and it's not easy, but those two things are quite linked when it comes to profit, corporations for profit. Regulators definitely have a place to play as well. Like if it becomes a statutory requirement, the biggest problem is, do those regulatory requirements actually have teeth at the end of the day? And will they actually fine people for getting it wrong? And will they actually censure? And that remains to be seen, I think, is a question. Particularly in countries, I'm speaking as an American as well, where corporations and governments are often quite linked together. And it is quite difficult to untie those things. But yeah.
I think the only way you get corporations to care is money. You have to hit them in the wallet. That's the only way that they're going to care about anything. So whether that's kind of fines if they get it wrong or funding to get it right, it needs to be monetary in some way, because that's all they care about.
Yeah, it always sounds really distasteful when you start talking about like why ethics are profitable, but actually that is a story that you can sell to corporations as to why diverse content, why ethics, why consumers respond to that sort of thing actually helps increase your profit margin. We have to sort of swallow our pride a little bit when we tell those stories, but it does help because it does resonate, and it's true. It is true in the end of the day as well.
Thank you so much. Can you join me, please, in thanking our speakers, Lesley-Anne and Rachel? Thank you very much. Feel free to jump down, but don't hurt yourself. Be careful. Okay.
That was slightly easier.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Now we're testing our very first ever, I think, I'm not getting that wrong. Stephen's nodding. Excellent. Open mic session of Women in Data and AI Meetup. So if anyone has an event that they would like to share or anything they'd like to talk about with the group, please stick up your hand. I've got a volunteer. Fantastic. Come on up to the top and you can tell everybody. I'm going to give you this mic, but remember it's not for sound, just for our live stream. Hi, Annalie.
Hi.
Thank you so much.
You probably know which event
I do, but that's okay. Everyone else needs to hear about it anyway.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Annalie Ritari-Stewart. I'm the new chair of the DMA in Scotland. So that's the Data Marketing Association. And Alison has kindly agreed to be on our Scottish Council. So we have got an event coming up on Tuesday. So this Tuesday, the 25th, at Phoenix head office, which is just off Lothian Road. And it's all about how you drive responsible growth with AI in marketing. So we've got a packed morning with speakers, Scottish Alliance, Data Lab. We're also talking about ethics and how to harness AI responsibly. So really some practical tips about ethical implementation. And then we've got a whole range of different companies sharing their experiences around application of AI in marketing. So we've got the managing director of People's Postcode Lottery. We've got I don't know if any of you have heard of Kat Levers, so she's head of brand for Visit Scotland. We've got Standard Life and various different other agencies taking part. So hopefully it'll be a good interactive discussion as well, and it's free to attend. So yeah, that's.
Find out how to sign up?
And so can I share a link with you? Otherwise, if you just go and search at the DMA for the Scottish AI event, it comes up in Google. Yeah. Great.
Smashing. Thank you so much. Thanks. I'll take that. Cheers. Anything from anyone else that'd like to share? Oh, brilliant. Come on up. Excellent. This could be like therapy. I mean, you don't have to share that much. That's okay.
I'll save that for next time. Hello, I run a company called People of Data that's all about collecting data inclusively, entirely built off of what these guys were talking about. How do we collect data in a way that's actually representative of all the diversity that we have and we hold? Like you say, it actually ends up saving companies money. So what I'm trying to do at the moment is just speak to community and events-based organisations to support them to collect information better. So I don't know if you're sending a feedback form today after this event?
We don't usually, actually, but feel free to sort of, send information.
Maybe we should, so that we could understand the impact that this event has and how it feels to be in a room that looks like this, when I'm sure all of your workplaces do not look like this. So yeah, People of Data, give us a follow on LinkedIn. It's still a very new company. We're still figuring out exactly what we're doing, but for now, working with community and events-based organisations to actually give a shit about who you are.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Any final takers? No, if that's the case, can we give our speakers a final round of applause, please? Thank you. And thanks so much to our 2 willing volunteers who did our open mic. Thank you very much for speaking. And thanks again for coming along. Much appreciated. I think we've got sort of 25 minutes left to do some chatting, networking. I think hopefully our speakers are sticking around if you want to ask questions. So thanks again. Cheers. Oh, just you.